The number one player in the country was in Tiger Stadium on Friday night, and Bo Davis popped a big-time defensive line commit. It's bonus content here on Locked on LSU. Let's get it.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Glad to have you aboard with us here. Thank you for hanging out, and thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts, and of course on YouTube. Brian Kelly, Friday Night Lights, a massive recruiting event going on in Tiger Stadium. The number one player in the country, Bryce Underwood, an LSU commit, was in Tiger Stadium. I got some thoughts on that, and LSU pops a big-time in-state defensive line commit on Friday night from the city of New Orleans. We're getting to that, but I got to remind you, our show today is brought to you by eBay Motors. From brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Bryce Underwood is the number one player in the country for 2025. He's a quarterback out of Michigan. You know that he's already committed to LSU, did so a few months back. And earlier this week, there was a lot of hullabaloo because the Elite 11 was going on. And the Elite 11 is it's a shorts and T-shirt throw against air competition, so to speak. And I don't put a ton of stock in it. I rattled off a really long list on Twitter because the long story short is that an Alabama commit, Keelan Russell, won the 7-on-7 or the Elite 11 MVP. And so there's a lot of Alabama fans who are celebrating that. I rattled off a long, a non-distinguished list of quarterbacks who have won that Elite 11 MVP, from Spencer Rattler and Shea Patterson to Blake Barnett, Sean White, Asante Woolard, Neil Burcham, Tanner Mangum, Jeff Driscoll, Jake Heaps, John Brantley, Rhett Bomar, Kyle Wright. There's a long list of quarterbacks that won the MVP of that Elite 11 that didn't exactly go on to have great college careers. There's some that did, but overwhelmingly the MVPs of that event did not. Bryce Underwood didn't compete. And the reason Bryce Underwood didn't compete at the Elite 11 is because Bryce Underwood was in Baton Rouge for an unofficial visit for Friday Night Lights. He flew from Michigan with his family back to Baton Rouge. If that doesn't say this man is pot committed to the Tigers, I don't know what else he could possibly do. He is committed. He said he talks to Harlem Berry, LSU's 5-star running back commit, every single day. They are building a monster class for 2025, currently ranked number 2 in the country behind Ohio State. But the caveat there is LSU has 12 commits in the class. Ohio State has 16. Bama, one spot behind LSU, has 17. So that is the definition of quality over quantity. But I keep thinking about Bryce Underwood, and I know LSU fans are excited, but I keep thinking about how much more massive this would be in perception if this came on National Signing Day. For some context around Bryce Underwood, and again, part of the reason Bryce Underwood was here was to work with his future teammates and to be a catalyst at a massive recruiting event to try to have a Pied Piper effect to get more blue chip talent that was on campus to commit to LSU and to join him in Baton Rouge. How do you not love that when the best player in the country is also your best recruiter in the entire class? But just for some context on Bryce Underwood, I went back and looked this up today. And for as long as 24/7 Sports has issued ratings, I'm not talking about ranking like a 5-star, the number player of the country, but a rating out of 100. Bryce Underwood, dating all the way back to the year 2000, so quarter century now, Bryce Underwood is ranked number 22, the 22nd ranked quarterback in the last 25 years. For some context, players that are rated behind Bryce Underwood, again, at this point in their career, right? And Bryce Underwood isn't even to his signing day yet, so his rating could conceivably even increase or improve. Bryce Underwood, 22nd all time. Caleb Williams, guy was just first-round draft pick, number 1 overall pick, 31. Tim Tebow, maybe the greatest college quarterback of my or any era? Number 44. How about Cam Newton? Heisman Trophy winner, national champion, number 1 overall pick, NFL MVP, 75. Jamarcus Russell became a number 1 pick at LSU, 87. Tua, really good player at Alabama, 91. Matt Leinart won a natty at USC, won a Heisman, was a top 10 pick, 98th. I can keep going. Walker Howard, who was a 5-star when he signed with LSU, and we were all really excited about, he was 110th. He is 110th all time. CJ Stroud, great career at Ohio State, great rookie season in the NFL with the Texans, 114. I think you get the point. The point is, Bryce Underwood is in extremely rarefied air, even among some of the best quarterbacks of this era that we've seen at this point in his career. Going into his high school senior season, he's rated higher than all those players that I just mentioned. So you should be fired up about Bryce Underwood. And when I start to look at what the quarterback room will look like at LSU in 2025, the big question is what's going to happen with Garrett Nussmeier. Does Garrett Nussmeier return for a 5th season? A lot of it's going to depend on how 2024 goes. AJ Swan, remember, transferred in from Vanderbilt. He'll be a 4th-year player, conceivably, in 2025. Ricky Collins will be a 3rd-year player. Colin Hurley will be a 2nd-year player. And then Bryce Underwood will be a freshman. So Nussmeier, Swan, Collins, Hurley, and Underwood. That would be 5 quarterbacks on the roster for next year if everybody returns. Now, there's obviously the possibility that Garrett Nussmeier could go pro early. There's certainly a possibility that Ricky Collins or Colin Hurley or AJ Swan, one of the other 3, transfer. Wouldn't be unheard of if it were to go that way. But I think the point is, and what's most important, is to remember that in the ever-evolving era of college football, in an era where guys, especially the quarterback position, don't stay, where Garrett Nussmeier is an outlier, where when you look at the most successful LSU quarterbacks over the last 15 years, it's Zach Mettenberger, a transfer, Joe Burrow, a transfer, Jaden Daniels, a transfer. You could even throw Danny Etling in there, a transfer from Purdue. It hasn't been the guys that signed out of high school and stayed. So maybe Bryce Underwood, with an opportunity to play early in his career, could buck that trend. But so far, so great for Bryce Underwood, who, by the way, go check out Shea Dixon on Twitter. He's got some video of Bryce Underwood throwing the football to Harlem Berry in Tiger Stadium on Friday night. I mean, effortless dimes, 50 yards down the field, burning defenders. I mean, it is going to be so exciting to watch those guys play in Tiger Stadium coming up. So not only was Bryce Underwood in Tiger Stadium and Harlem Berry, but LSU popped a major commit on Friday night from the state of Louisiana for the class of 2026. We'll tell you about him when we continue here on Locked on LSU, your team every day. This bonus episode of Locked on LSU is brought to you by FanDuel. Y'all, summertime is here. It means baseball. The NBA Finals have come and gone now. Stanley Cup Finals going to a Game 7. You can bet on all of it on FanDuel. By the way, right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. How about bet on the College World Series, Championship Series with Texas A&M and Tennessee starting on Saturday? Gag me with those 2 teams. But do you think the Aggies pull it off? How about maybe with Ryan Prager on the bump in Game 1? Could be a safe bet, taking the Aggies on the run line if you want to give yourself a little cushion there. I like the Aggies to win the game outright, but you can decide and you can bet right now at FanDuel. That's $200 that you can use to bet on everything from the MVPs to who's going to hit one out of the park there at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon, and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com right now. FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, as we continue here, not only was it a massive Friday night for LSU because of Bryce Underwood and Harlem Berry being on campus, but the Tigers also popped a commit for 2026 in defensive lineman Richard Anderson. Now, Richard Anderson is out of New Orleans. He is a 4-star for Edna Carr. Now, he's a 2026 player. Okay, so this means he's going into his high school junior season. But I love the quote that he told on Three's Billy Embody. He said, "It was an easy decision. There's no place like home." And when you look at what LSU and what Brian Kelly has done with this coaching staff, He has not only built elite recruiters, he has built elite recruiters that understand the state of Louisiana. Frank Wilson is New Orleans high school royalty. If there is somebody out of the city of New Orleans that Frank Wilson wants, odds are he's going to get him. And Richard Anderson's a great case in point of that. And then there's Bo Davis, not only one of the greatest technical defensive line coaches in the country, he's also an elite recruiter who played at LSU and obviously has deep ties to the state as well. So Richard Anderson is a guy who is massive, both figuratively and literally. So I'll give you the specs on Richard Anderson real quick. He is, again, keep in mind, this guy just finished his sophomore year in high school. He's going to be a high school junior. 6'3.5", 325. When we think about the dominant teams of LSU's past, it's been in the trenches with guys that look like that. 6'3.5", 325 as a rising high school junior. He's the number 131 overall prospect in the country, the 13th best defensive tackle, and the 7th best player in the state of Louisiana. And I know we've talked about this before. You're going to hear me say it a lot over the next year and a half. 2025, of course, is shaping up to be a special class. But 2026, there is a bumper crop in the state of Louisiana, which we often see in this state from time to time. And those are the classes upon which championship rosters are built. You could think back to that 2001 recruiting class that had Michael Clayton and Marcus Spears and the late Marquise Hill, all those guys that decided to stay home and play for LSU, and they won a championship in 2003. You could say the same about the 2011 class that they call themselves the FAM, with Jarvis and Odell and Freak Johnson and so many great players. And then you could obviously look at the 2019 championship team, and you could look at guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Patrick Queen. I know I'm naming guys, I'm going to leave some off, but understand that when you get those classes that have this amazing bumper crop in the state, you keep them home. Those are the core foundation of championship teams. Jakeem Stewart is the number 3 overall player in the country. Lamar out of St. Aug. Lamar Brown is the number 5 overall player in the country out of U High. And Blaine Bradford, a safety out of Catholic High, is the number 15 overall player in the country. And Bradford will probably increase. He was injured last year, so he missed his junior year, most of his junior year. So even still having missed that year, he's still the number 15 overall prospect in the country. And LSU, on the On3 rankings, is favored to land Stewart, Brown, Bradford. The 4th best player in the state is Bryson Martinez. He's number 40 nationally. Aiden Hall is number 46 nationally. He's favored from Edincar in New Orleans. He's favored to end up in Baton Rouge. Martinez, by the way, is an offensive tackle from East Ascension. Hall is a safety. And then Jabari Mack is the number 6 player, as a receiver out of Destrehan. And then there's Richard Anderson, the number 7 player in the state of Louisiana, a high 4-star who is now committed to LSU. And the next 2 players in the country as well, or in the state, are Dylan Berryman, a defensive lineman out of Ouachita, who's a heavy lean toward LSU, and then Darius McKinley, Dominic McKinley's younger brother out of Acadiana, who's also a lean to LSU. So the point is, we talked about Brad Davis earlier this week, and how he's built the offensive line. Bo Davis is starting to do the very same on the defensive line. Yes, it is time to be very excited about the quality, the caliber, and the depth of the roster that Brian Kelly and this coaching staff is building. I'll say it again. It took Brian Kelly a minute. It took him a minute to understand, to really sink his teeth into the value of the dirt in Louisiana. But he's got it now, and it does not look like he is looking back at all. So a massive weekend for LSU already, and that's just coming off a Friday night. Be interesting to see what the rest of the weekend holds, with a massive recruiting weekend on campus with Friday night lights, and the rest of the weekend with a lot of blue chip prospects. Okay, we're going to wrap up this bonus episode of Locked on LSU. Do us a favor and smash that like button on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel on whatever podcast you're listening to. We'd appreciate if you would subscribe up, rate us, leave a review, let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here weekdays for Locked on LSU, your team every day.